Number 6. Hashima Island. Hashima Island, also known as Gunkanjima, stands as a small, abandoned isle situated 9.5 miles off the coast of Nagasaki, Japan. Aptly nicknamed Battleship Island due to its shape, this once thriving coal mining hub has been deserted for years, yet it's far from empty. The island's haunting structures and buildings bear the weight of its tumultuous history. The island's journey dates back to 1887 when coal was discovered, leading to its purchase by Mitsubishi in 1890. It then swiftly became a symbol of Japan's rapid industrialization. The first concrete building, a resilient 9-story structure, appeared in 1916, designed to withstand the island's frequent typhoons. The island's expansion continued with buildings constructed primarily by forced Korean and Chinese laborers from 1930 to just after World War II. The grueling conditions earned it the ominous nicknames Jail Island and Hell Island. After the war, Hashima Island experienced a population boom, reaching its peak in 1959 with over 5,000 residents occupying limited living spaces of around 5 feet per person. However, by 1974, the coal mines were depleted, leading to a mass exodus and nature's reclamation of the uninhabited areas. Decay then set in as weather conditions eroded the concrete structures, contributing to the island's eerie atmosphere. In an effort to preserve the site, Japan opened Hashima Island to tourists, making necessary repairs to ensure their safety. And UNESCO even recognized its historical significance by including it on the World Heritage List in 2015, despite opposition from North and South Korea due to the island's dark past as a site of forced labor. Today, visitors can explore Hashima Island, encountering the remnants of its industrial past amidst an unsettling ambiance. Reports of strange occurrences persist, like flickering lights within the buildings despite the absence of electricity, unexplained noises, and chilling cold spots. Some even claim to have felt watched and even touched by unseen hands. Hashima Island, a haunting testament to the complexities of history, remains accessible to those who wish to explore its enigmatic past. And for those unable to visit in person, Google Maps provides a virtual tour of the island's impressive relics. Number 5. Ryugyong Hotel. Construction of the Ryugyong Hotel, situated in North Korea's capital Pyongyang, began in 1987 as an ambitious project with a pyramid-shaped design aiming to exceed 1,000 feet in height. Designed to accommodate over 3,000 rooms and feature 5 revolving restaurants with panoramic views, the hotel was initially projected to open just 2 years later. However, the building's completion timeline veered dramatically off course. The construction reached its intended height by 1992, but it remained a hollow structure devoid of windows for another 16 years. This led to its moniker, the Hotel of Doom, a towering concrete sentinel looming over the city. The hotel's exterior was subsequently covered in metal and glass, with the addition of LED lights that transformed it into an illuminated nighttime spectacle. Throughout its history, construction of the Ryugyong Hotel has been marked by starts and stops. It remains closed to this day, making it the world's tallest unoccupied building. The hotel's inception was a product of the Cold War rivalry between North Korea, backed by the Soviet Union, and South Korea with the support from the United States. Intended as a response to South Korea's achievements, the hotel was meant to be completed in time for the 1989 World Festival of Youth and Students. However, engineering issues and economic strain hindered its progress. The hotel's unusual pyramid shape was dictated by its construction material, reinforced concrete, a departure from steel typically used for skyscrapers. While exterior cladding and LED lighting have been added, interior progress has been slow. Photographs from 2012 revealed minimal interior work, and efforts to complete the hotel have been met with challenges, including the departure of a luxury hotel group due to concerns over structural soundness. Nevertheless, the hotel's facade and LED displays, which showcase North Korea history and slogans, have breathed new life into the structure. Recent years have seen site development around the hotel, and while its future remains uncertain, the Ryugyong Hotel stands as a unique symbol of both North Korea's architectural ambitions and its enigmatic narrative on the world stage. If you had all the money in the world to build anything you wanted, what would you construct? Let us know what you think in the comments down below, and while you're at it, subscribe to the channel. Now let's move on to number 4, the Wonderland Amusement Park. The grand vision of the Wonderland Amusement Park was to establish the largest theme park in Asia, sprawling across a vast 120 acres. The park is located on the outskirts of Beijing in Chenzhuang Village, Changping District. Conceived by the Rainwood Group, a Thai-Chinese property developer with interests in China, the park aimed to leverage its proximity to Beijing, just a 20-minute drive away, to attract visitors from the densely populated region. Launched in 1998, the ambitious project sought to create a Disneyland-style theme park with a central castle reminiscent of iconic Disney landmarks. Themed areas bore uncanny resemblances to Disney parks, prompting speculation that the designers copied their competitors' blueprints, anticipating minimal copyright enforcement in China. However, the landscape of the amusement park drastically shifted when construction came to an abrupt halt that same year. Rumors swirled about the reasons behind the sudden abandonment. Some tales ranged from haunted land to the discovery of mass graves. However, the truth was rooted in financial constraints. The developers ran out of funds, leaving Wonderland unfinished and dilapidated. Efforts to revive the project in 2008 faltered, and the park met its end in 2013 when it was demolished. Over the years, the site became a hauntingly surreal tableau as farmers reclaimed the land, using the unfinished attractions as backdrops for their agricultural pursuits. The castle, intended to be the park's centerpiece, was weathered by the elements, deteriorating into rubble. Other structures, like a medieval-themed village, were gradually reclaimed by nature, with vegetation encroaching upon the once-imagined attractions. While superstitions about ghosts and burial sites emerged, the demise of the park seemed more closely tied to China's property bubble. The fate of Wonderland diverged from Disney's success story in China, and Disney forged ahead with a park in Shanghai which opened in 2016. In the wake of Wonderland's demolition, Rainwood Group's attempts to transform the site into a luxury goods supermarket fizzled, eventually giving rise to the battling Outlets shopping mall in 2015. As the remnants of Wonderland faded into history, Beijing's theme park landscape underwent a renaissance with the impending opening of Universal Beijing, promising state-of-the-art attractions for visitors. At number 3, New York's Dream Rooftop Airport. Delta Airlines recently installed a new rooftop lounge at JFK Airport, yet the history of aviation dreams in New York City goes far beyond this. The intriguing idea of constructing a massive rooftop airport in Midtown Manhattan was proposed in 1946, showcasing the ambition and imagination of the past. The project was spearheaded by real estate magnate William Zeckendorf, who owned iconic properties like the Chrysler Building and the Astor Hotel. Zeckendorf's audacious plans entailed a sprawling 990-acre airport stretching across 144 blocks, elevated 200 feet above street level. This airport building complex would have housed a range of facilities, including restaurants, business spaces, and waiting areas, as well as ticketing offices, much like the functions of present-day Port Authority or Penn Station. Notably, the airport wasn't confined to air travel. It also included piers for ships, illustrating Zeckendorf's multimodal approach. Impressively, the proposed airport could have accommodated 68 aircraft departures an hour, rivaling the operational capacity of existing airports like LaGuardia, Newark, and JFK. The primary allure of this audacious project was the convenience it promised. With Manhattan's bustling population, the Manhattan Airport would have eradicated the need for locals to venture to distant locations like Queens, Flushing, or New Jersey for their air travel needs. And while the central location held appeal, practical concerns couldn't be ignored. Runway overshooting and already congested airspace above New York posed significant challenges. The city already boasted 3 major airports, making it one of the busiest travel hubs globally, casting doubt on the viability of a 4th. The notion of rooftop airports wasn't exclusive to New York. A 1934 Illustrator and Popular Science Monthly depicted a similar area, an airport spanning the River Thames in London, with the runway seemingly converging toward the towering Westminster Palace. This era evidently bred visionary projects. Despite Zeckendorf's proposal not materializing, the fascination with convenient city airports persisted, and in 2009 the Manhattan Airport Foundation humorously proposed an airport in the heart of Central Park, highlighting the ongoing desire for increased air travel accessibility. Remarkably, over 85,000 people signed a petition advocating for the development of a centrally located international air transportation hub in the city, showcasing the enduring interest in the concept. These historical endeavors remind us of the ceaseless pursuit of progress and convenience, even as they remain excluded from the realm of visionary ideas and amusing anecdotes. Number 2, Forest City. Forest City is an ambitious residential development and private town located in the city of Iskandur Putere, state of Johor, encompassing a vast 3,385-acre expanse. First introduced in 2006, this project was aligned with China's Belt and Road Initiative, aiming to reshape the landscape of Iskandur Putere. The project gained prominence when then Prime Minister Najib Razak inaugurated it in 2016, endorsed by the Sultan of Johor, Sultan Ibrahim Ismail. The initiative was propelled by a joint venture between Esplanade Danga 88 and Country Garden Holdings Limited, holding 40% and 60% of shares respectively. However, the development of Forest City has been contentious from the start. The project was initially aimed at upper-middle-class Chinese citizens seeking offshore investment opportunities, luring them with relatively affordable seafront properties compared to pricey urban areas like Shanghai. But despite early optimism, sales plummeted due to factors such as currency controls imposed by China's leader Xi Jinping, the Malaysian political crisis of 2020 through 2022, and the COVID-19 pandemic, causing the project to be dubbed a ghost town. The environmental toll has also marred Forest City's image. Despite marketing claims of ecologically conscious development, its rapid expansion on reclaimed land raised concerns over habitat destruction, especially within the environmentally sensitive area Rank 1, where development is generally prohibited. The reclamation, initiated in 2014 without the legally required detailed environmental impact assessment, led to environmental and social conflicts, such as reduced catches for traditional fishing villages. Reports of cracks in buildings, sinking roads, and doubts about the long-term sustainability of the development due to hasty reclamation emerged. The project's clients, often Chinese buyers, abandoned units and sold them at significant losses amid geopolitical uncertainties between China and Malaysia. Forest City's history also involves a political shift. When Mahathir Mohamad, a vocal critic of Chinese investment and corruption, assumed office in 2018 and introduced restrictions on foreigners buying property. COVID-19 further exacerbated Forest City's struggles, causing a drastic drop in sales and operational difficulties due to movement restrictions. Although labeled one of the world's most useless megaprojects, Forest City still clings to development hopes, with buildings and golf courses gradually being completed. And despite the challenges and controversies, the development is expected to carry on until its targeted completion date in 2035. And at number 1, Chicago's subway to nowhere. Picture a scenario where you invest your hard-earned money in a venture, but it disappears into thin air. Now magnify this thought. What if you handed over your funds to someone else who promised substantial returns, only to see those promises fall flat? Unbelievable? Well, the people of Chicago have already been a part of it. This story unfolds deep beneath Chicago's iconic Block 37, situated between State and Dearborn at Randolph Street. A decade ago, the Chicago Transit Authority proposed launching a non-stop train service connecting the Loop to O'Hare and Midway airports. The plan materialized only to the extent of a superstation shell beneath Block 37, wedged between the red and blue subway lines. The project was eventually halted due to escalating expenses, funding uncertainties, and doubts about its feasibility. And strikingly, over a decade later, the people of Chicago are still footing the bill. The Civic Federation's Lawrence Missal said, "It was definitely something that was ill-conceived, ill-planned, that was premature in beginning construction." The original idea was for the superstation to serve as a departure point for specialized airport-bound trains, offering seamless travel. However, a consultant study revealed that travelers would still have used the same Blue Line tracks behind slower trains, rendering time savings non-existent. And despite the extravagant vision, the project's cost estimates in 2006 dollars ranged from $771 million to $1.5 billion. The proposal entailed extensive work along the Kennedy Expressway, reshaping overpasses and on-off ramps across 3.7 miles, and reconstructing airport train stations alone would have cost millions. In 2016, the Civic Federation approximated that the project's ongoing cost surpassed $400 million. The original bonds, initially set for a 12-year tenure, were refinanced, extending payments by another 12 years. And all this for an incomplete, locked-up station which will likely never see operation. Photos obtained through a Freedom of Information request showcase a desolate shell of a station, concrete platforms but no tracks or trains. Canceling the project alone cost over $40 million, with hopes that a private vendor might one day take up the challenge. Greg Hines from Crane's Chicago Business aptly labeled the situation wacko, highlighting the power dynamics that sometimes fuel impractical initiatives. The station remains unseen by many due to security reasons, but glimpses indicate a grim, unfinished space. The CTA, while declining an interview, clarified that the superstation originated under the previous administration, absolving the current administration of involvement. The station, though maintained at extremely minimal costs, has no imminent use. So what's the takeaway? This fiasco serves as a cautionary tale, underlining the need for inclusive decision-making and transparent evaluation when embarking on ambitious projects. The lack of comprehensive planning showcases the pitfalls of a vision unvetted and a venture ungrounded. Emsal wisely stated, "This is a classic example of where a failure to plan became a plan to fail." In essence, it underscores the need for careful scrutiny, open disclosure, and a well-structured execution when the city invests in monumental projects.
6. The Hindenburg Disaster. The 1930s was the golden age of air travel, especially for those who could afford the luxury of booking a flight on a Zeppelin, like the Hindenburg. Cut the time required for transatlantic travel in half compared to even the fastest ships, and not only that, but passengers could travel in luxury. They had their own cabins and a multitude of rooms, including a luxurious dining room where they could eat accompanied by a live piano, and even a special smoking room. Unfortunately, all that would change on May 3, 1937. The Hindenburg left Frankfurt at 7 a.m., heading across Europe, ready to start its transatlantic crossing at 2 a.m. the following morning. At 4:15 p.m., the Hindenburg was due to land at its final destination at the Lakehurst Naval Airfield in New Jersey. But the captain, Max Pruss, was informed by Charles Rosendahl to delay the landing as a storm had picked up in the area. The Hindenburg waited out the storm by hovering around the coast of New Jersey until 2 hours later, Captain Pruss considered it clear to come in for landing. The landing itself was far from smooth. Originally anticipating and working with an easterly wind, Pruss and the rest of the crew worked their landing calculations accordingly, aiming to take an oval-shaped trajectory in the air while they lowered altitude and lined up with the landing strip. Yet, in the middle of maneuvers, the wind abruptly changed direction from the east to the southwest, causing the crew of the Hindenburg to execute a series of sharp turns in order to adjust their position for landing, as well as venting excess hydrogen gas to help with the descent. However, as the Hindenburg was about 180 feet above the ground and readying the landing ropes, a wave-like fluttering was seen near its tail, before there was an eruption of flame. Within 37 seconds, the flames had consumed the ship, sending it crashing to the ground in a fireball that shocked the world. Out of the 97 people on board, 35 people lost their lives in the tragedy. Many of these survivors suffered serious injuries as a result. Passengers reported being flung around the cabin before desperately smashing open the side windows in the promenade in order to jump out to safety. Those in deeper parts of the ship were not as fortunate. The Hindenburg disaster was not the worst loss of life from a Zeppelin crash, but it served as one of the final nails in the coffin for airships. This is because the entire tragedy was caught on film and watched by shocked audiences all over the world. 5. The Panama Canal traffic jam. Traffic jams don't just occur on the roads, and there's an ongoing problem in Panama that's likely to have global implications. The Panama Canal, a major trade route running from the Atlantic to the Pacific, has experienced an unprecedented level of drought. This, coupled with the historically inefficient management, has meant that the water level in the canal has reached a record low. This means that fewer ships are given clearance to traverse the canal each day, with the number dropping from 36 crossings a day to 32. While you may think that just 4 fewer ships a day seems like a silly number to point out, even this minor reduction has had major impacts on the Panama Canal. There are now hundreds of ships full of cargo lined up at each side, just waiting to be able to cross. This blunder is likely to have the largest effect on those living in the USA, as delayed goods will cause the cost of existing ones to rise. And as over $270 billion worth of US goods make their way into the country via the Panama Canal each and every year, that's a lot of money. But how have things been allowed to get this bad? One of the reasons behind the recent issues lies in something that should have stopped them from happening in the first place. In 2016, a third lane was added to the Panama Canal, which would increase the amount of traffic able to make it through by a significant margin. However, when this was implemented, those in charge failed to realize that in order to have this extra channel, they would need more water in the canal in order to support it. You may think that it would be easy to funnel more water into the Panama Canal, but there's a key problem. The water for the canal also shares its source with the drinking water provided to the people of Panama. As of this video, the queued up ships at the Panama Canal keep on growing in number. Who knows when a solution will be found? What's the longest traffic jam you've been in? Let us know in the comments down below, and don't forget to click that subscribe button. 4. The St. Francis Dam Disaster. The St. Francis Dam was constructed in San Francisco in California in 1926. It was built to create a reservoir for the Los Angeles and Owens rivers. The project was overseen by William Mulholland, who was a respected engineer at the Los Angeles Bureau of Waterworks and Supply. So, when cracks and leaks started to appear while the dam was being built, no one doubted Mulholland when he told them that these were nothing to worry about. However, this would go on to become one of the worst engineering disasters in history. 2 years on March 7, 1928, the dam was finally ready to be put into use. It was filled to capacity, and Mulholland went down to inspect it, declaring that the dam was safe. Just 5 days later, more cracks started to appear in the dam. Just before midnight on March 12th, the concrete wall completely collapsed, sending a deluge of water down the canyon towards the Pacific Ocean. In the way of the entire reservoir's worth of water and its final destination were at least 4 towns, Castite Junction, Fillmore, Bardsdale, and Piru, which were completely flooded and destroyed by the dam break. Over 450 lives were recorded as being lost to the St. Francis Dam. However, it's likely that the true death toll is much higher than this. Many bodies were never recovered due to the force of the water washing them away, and the area was a hub for many transient farm workers and illegal immigrants for whom records would have been hard, if not impossible to find. After the tragedy, an investigation took place through which it was found that the dam should never have been built there at all. The rocks around San Francisco were in no way suitable to house a reservoir or a dam. However, rather than facing justice for the sheer engineering negligence on his part, Mulholland was cleared of any charges against him. But understandably, his reputation was so tarnished that he never worked in the sector again. 3. The Columbia Space Shuttle Disaster. Columbia was built by NASA and was the very first space shuttle to be used in spaceflight back in 1981. In contrast to other rockets, space shuttles were designed to be reused multiple times, making them perfect for ferrying astronauts and scientists up to the International Space Station, which was under construction at the time. In 2003, Columbia went up on her 28th journey into space on January 16th, taking 7 crew members with her: Rick Husband, Michael Anderson, David Brown, Kalpana Chawla, Laurel Clark, William McCool, and Ilan Ramon. The crew engaged in various pieces of research, as well as helping with some of the construction of the ISS. The team also performed experiments around the clock in areas such as fluid physics, material sciences, and life sciences. After a 2-week stint in space, it was finally time for Columbia and her crew to return to Earth. However, as the space shuttle began re-entry on February 1st, tragedy struck. Abnormal temperature readings and disappearing sensors caused mission control concern as they reached out to Columbia. The response back from the shuttle was "Roger," before another word that was cut off mid-sentence. Mission Control tried again to try to get in touch with the crew, but they had no success. Soon after, reports started to come in of a space shuttle that had been recorded breaking up in the sky by a television network. Their worst fears were confirmed. Space Shuttle Columbia and the 7 crew members on board were declared lost that same day. But what happened to cause such a catastrophic failure of the space shuttle? Upon launch, NASA noticed a small amount of foam break off of the bipod ramp, which connected the external fuel tank to the shuttle. This foam then struck the left wing of the craft, something which seems insignificant but would turn out to be fatal. The foam created a hole in the wing, which allowed for atmospheric gases to bleed into Columbia as it returned to Earth, eventually consuming and breaking apart the space shuttle. The search for debris from Columbia in order to gain answers was a lengthy process. Because of the altitude at which the space shuttle had broken up, the wreckage had spread across an area of around 2,000 square miles within eastern Texas. Eventually, NASA managed to retrieve 84,000 fragments, accounting for nearly 40% of Columbia's total weight. Among these recovered materials were the remains of the crew, which were identified through DNA analysis. The debris was laid out meticulously in a hangar back at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, showcasing just how many small pieces such a large spacecraft had eventually become. As for the astronauts on board, in 2008, NASA issued a report on the survival of the Columbia crew, offering insights into their final moments. It suggested that the astronauts may have survived the initial breakup of the Columbia shuttle, but they quickly lost consciousness within seconds as the cabin's pressure dropped, a small consolation for what was such a terrible tragedy. 2. The Sultana. The Sultana was a wooden paddle steamer built in 1863. Her primary purpose was to transport people and cargo between St. Louis and New Orleans on the Mississippi River. On April 23, 1865, not long after the conclusion of the American Civil War, the Sultana pulled into the port of Vicksburg so that her boilers could undergo repairs and maintenance. While the ship was there, the captain, J. Cass Mason, was given an offer from the US government that he could not refuse. He would be paid a considerable sum of money to transport former Union soldiers who had been held as prisoners of war in Confederate prisons back home to the North. In order to be able to meet this contract, instead of a thorough repair and overhaul that had been planned, Captain Mason chose to just patch up the leaky boiler of the ship to save time. The capacity of the Sultana was 376 passengers. However, the ship soon found itself carrying far more than this, as over 2,000 prisoners were being held in Vicksburg and were crammed onto the ship. Captain Mason did this out of fear that other ships and captains might be bribed to poach the soldiers in order to take the money for themselves. Rightly so, there were concerns about the ship being overloaded, but these were dismissed by Captain George Williams, who was overseeing the transport of the troops. The Sultana set off on her way. The journey would put a lot of strain on the steamer's boilers, as not only did she have to deal with ferrying far more passengers than she should, but the Sultana was also fighting a much faster river current on the Mississippi than usual, caused by the spring thaw of that year. Eventually, the boilers exploded, blowing a hole in the middle of the ship alongside starting a catastrophic fire on board. Although many of the prisoners on board were lucky enough to be able to jump overboard, a lot of them died trying to make it to shore. Not only that, but out of the survivors who did make it to dry land, 200 of them subsequently died due to severe burns sustained due to the fire on board the Sultana. All in all, 1,195 of the 2,200 people on board the Sultana lost their lives that day, making it the deadliest maritime disaster in US history. 1. The Great Molasses Flood. The people who lived and worked on North Boston's Commercial Street in 1919 were used to going about their day while there was a metallic groaning and wailing in the background. This noise came from a large 50-foot tall tank owned by the United States Industrial Alcohol and was full to the brim with molasses. Molasses were used extensively in order to create both alcohol and ammunition critical to the war effort in World War I. However, since the conflict ended in 1918, the need for it slowed. Boston had an unusually mild winter in January 1919, with the temperature usually over 40 degrees. As a result, the street bustled with activity. On January 15th, the peace was shattered by a tremendous metallic roar. The molasses tank had burst open, sending a 15-foot wall of hot, tar-like syrup cascading down Commercial Street at a speed of 35 miles per hour. People were either knocked back by the tidal wave of stickiness, or they were consumed and suffocated by it. The force of the substance was so strong that it even managed to rip the Engine 31 firehouse on the street clean off its foundations. Just as quickly as it had started, the wave of molasses receded, leaving chaos in its wake. The cleanup and rescue operation would be a significant effort. Police, firefighters, and sailors from the nearby USS Nantucket scrambled to try and save as many people as they could, including those trapped in pockets of molasses, such as the men who'd been in the firehouse at the time of the disaster. In the end, 21 people died and 150 people suffered injuries. Rightly, the people wanted answers and filed lawsuits against United States Industrial Alcohol. It turned out that the walls of the tank were far too thin to be able to hold its contents, something which employees had signposted before but had been ignored. Keen to avoid blame, United States Industrial Alcohol claimed that the tank had exploded due to sabotage dating back to the First World War. But thankfully, the courts ruled in favor of negligence on the part of USIA, ordered them to pay $628,000 in damages, a sum that would equate to $8 million today, making for a bittersweet ending to this tale.
Number 7. Chicago's German U-boat. The U-505 is a German submarine that was captured by the U.S. Navy during World War II, and it's now on display at the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. The U-505 was a Type IXC submarine that was designed for long-range operations in the Atlantic Ocean. It could carry 22 torpedoes and a deck gun. The U-505 had a crew of 59 men and was commanded by Oberlieutenant Zur C. Harold Lang. On June 4, 1944, the U-505 was spotted by a U.S. Navy task group that was led by Captain Daniel V. Gallery, a Chicago man who ordered an attack on the sub. The U-505 was depth-charged, damaged, and forced to surface. Gallery then decided to board and capture the submarine, which was a risky and unprecedented move. The boarding party managed to secure the submarine and prevent it from sinking or exploding. They also retrieved valuable intelligence material like maps, codebooks, and Enigma machines. The capture of the U-505 was kept secret from the Germans, who thought the sub had sunk. The public was also left in the dark in order to prevent revealing the intelligence information that was obtained from the sub. The U-505 was then towed to Bermuda, where it was studied and stripped of its equipment and documents. After the war, the U-505 was slated for destruction, but Gallery intervened and persuaded the Navy to donate it to the Museum of Science and Industry in his hometown of Chicago. The U-505 arrived in Chicago in 1954 and has been on display ever since as a National War Memorial and a historic artifact. It's also the only remaining Type IXC submarine in the world. Number 6. The Hunt for U-744. The capture of U-744 was one of the most dramatic episodes of the Battle of the Atlantic, the longest continuous military campaign of World War II. The U-744 was a Type VIIC submarine that belonged to the German Kriegsmarine and operated in the Atlantic Ocean from 1943 to 1944. It was commanded by Oberlieutenant Zur C. Heinz Blischke, a veteran of 11 patrols and 3 sinkings. On March 5, 1944, the U-744 was detected by a British aircraft while returning from a patrol in the North Atlantic. The aircraft dropped depth charges on the submarine, forcing it to dive and evade. The U-744 then encountered a group of Allied ships, including the Canadian corvettes HMCS Chilliwack, HMCS Fennel, and the British destroyer HMS Icarus. The ships then launched a coordinated attack on the U-744, using sonar, radar, and Hedgehog anti-submarine weapons. The U-744 tried to escape by using various tactics like changing course, depth, and speed, as well as releasing decoys and firing torpedoes. However, the Allied ships were persistent and relentless, and they kept pursuing and attacking the U-744 for more than 30 hours. The submarine suffered severe damage from the repeated depth charge explosions, which caused leaks, fires, and electrical failures. The crew also endured physical and psychological stress from the noise, pressure, and lack of oxygen. Finally, on March 6, 1944, the U-744 was forced to surface after a direct hit from a Hedgehog weapon that was fired by the Royal Navy's HMS Bainton. The submarine was surrounded by the Allied ships, which opened fire with their guns. The crew of the U-744 realized that they had no chance of survival and decided to surrender. They raised a white flag and abandoned the submarine. Some of them jumped into the water while others were taken prisoner by Allied sailors. The British boarded the U-744 and took possession of its codebooks, Enigma machine, and other intelligence material. They also found a secret compartment that contained a large amount of gold bars and coins, which were part of a payment from Japan to Germany for war materials. The capture of the U-744 was a significant victory for the Allies, as it provided valuable information on German submarine operations and codes. And in the end, the U-744 was sunk by a British torpedo during some target practice. Number 5. The capture of the U-110. The capture of the U-110 was a remarkable event in World War II, as it gave the British access to the secret Enigma machine and codebooks that were used by the German Navy. The Enigma machine was a device that encrypted and decrypted messages using a complex system of rotors and wires. The Germans believed that their code was unbreakable and used it to communicate with their ships and submarines. On May 9, 1941, U-110, a Type IXB U-boat commanded by Captain Lieutenant Fritz Julius Lemp, was part of a wolf pack that attacked a British convoy in the Atlantic, just south of Iceland. U-110 fired 2 torpedoes at a merchant ship, but missed. The British escorts then detected the U-110 and launched depth charges that damaged the submarine and forced it to surface. Afterward, Lemp ordered his crew to abandon ship, thinking that the U-boat was sinking. He also tried to scuttle the boat by opening the valves in the ship's hull, called the seacocks, to allow some water into parts of the ship, but he failed to do so completely. And as the Germans were leaving the boat, a British destroyer called the HMS Bulldog approached and prepared to ram U-110. However, at the last moment, the Bulldog's captain saw that the U-boat was deserted and veered away. He then sent a boarding party to seize the U-110 before it sank. The British sailors managed to enter the U-boat and found the Enigma machine and codebooks still intact, so they quickly removed them and returned to their ship, leaving the U-110 to sink the next day. The capture of the U-110 was kept secret for 7 months, even from President Franklin D. Roosevelt. The Enigma machine and codebooks were taken to Bletchley Park, where a team of cryptographers led by Alan Turing worked on breaking the naval code. Their success gave the Allies a crucial advantage in the Battle of the Atlantic, as they could read the German messages and track their movements. The capture of the U-110 was one of the most important intelligence coups of the war. Number 4. Capture of the U-995. The U-995 was a German sub that was used by the German Kriegsmarine during World War II. It's one of the few surviving U-boats that can be visited today as a museum ship. U-995 is a Type VIIC/41 U-boat, which was an improved version of the most common U-boat type, the type VIIC. The U-995 had a displacement of 759 tons when surfaced and 860 tons when submerged. It was powered by 2 diesel engines and 2 electric motors and could reach speeds of up to 17.7 knots on the surface and 7.6 knots underwater. It was armed with 5 torpedo tubes, 14 torpedoes, and 3 anti-aircraft guns. It also had a crew of between 44 and 60 men. U-995 was launched on July 22, 1943, and it was commissioned that same year on September 16th, with Oberleutnant Walter Kontop as the commander. It underwent training until May of 1944 and then joined the 13th Flotilla for active service in the Atlantic and the Arctic. U-995 participated in 5 Wolfpacks, which were groups of U-boats that coordinated their attacks on Allied convoys. U-995 sank 3 merchant ships, 1 auxiliary warship, and 1 patrol boat. At the end of the war, on May 9, 1945, U-995 surrendered to the British at Trondheim, Norway. It wasn't transferred to the UK, but remained in Norway until October of 1948, when it was given to the Norwegian Navy. It was renamed the Kora and served as a training submarine until 1965. It was then sold to Germany for 1 Deutschmark and became a museum ship at the Labo Naval Memorial near Kiel in October 1971. U-995 is now a popular tourist attraction that allows visitors to see the interior and exterior of a historic U-boat. What's a good name for a naval submarine? Let us know what you come up with down below. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel. Now let's move on to number 3, the Vesikko. Vesikko is a historic submarine that served in the Finnish Navy during World War II. But now it's just a museum ship in Somaliina, a sea fortress and a UNESCO World Heritage Site in Helsinki, Finland. Vesikko was built in 1933 in the Finnish city of Turku as a prototype for the German Type II submarines. It was ordered by a Dutch engineering company that was a front for the German Navy, which was banned from building submarines after World War I. Vesikko was one of the first submarines to have a streamlined hull and a diesel-electric propulsion system. It had a displacement of 254 short tons when surfaced and 303 short tons when submerged. It could carry 5 torpedoes and had a .79-inch anti-aircraft gun and a .5-inch machine gun. It also had a crew of 16 men and could dive to a depth of 492 feet. Vesikko was purchased by the Finnish Navy in 1936 and was renamed from its yard number CV707 to Vesikko, which means mink in Finnish. It was one of the 5 submarines that Finland had during World War II, along with the 3 larger Vetehinen-class boats and a small Sauko sub. Vesikko participated in the Winter War and the Continuation War against the Soviet Union, performing convoy escort, patrol, and reconnaissance missions in the Gulf of Finland. Its only confirmed sinking, however, was the Soviet merchant ship Vyborg on July 3, 1941. After the war, Finland was forbidden from having submarines by the Paris Peace Treaty of 1947. All the Finnish submarines were scrapped except for the Vesikko, which was preserved as a memorial for the submarine service. It was restored to its original condition and was subsequently opened to the public as a museum ship in 1973. Number 2, the U-234. In the intriguing tale of the U-234, we find a German submarine entangled in a secret mission during 1945. This vessel was tasked with transporting a rather potent cargo, 1,235 pounds of uranium oxide, boasting an impressive 77% purity. This uranium stash was potentially sufficient for the creation of 2 atomic bombs, which were intended for Japan's atomic bomb program. And alongside this radioactive load, the submarine also carried an arsenal of advanced weaponry, including jet engines, radar equipment, and torpedoes. U-234 belonged to the Type XB U-boat family, originally designed for mine-laying duties. What set it apart, though, was its unique radar setup, sporting both a transmitter and a detection antenna. Aboard this clandestine vessel were 52 crew members and an additional 10 passengers, including 2 Japanese naval officers. Setting sail from Kiel on April 16, 1945, U-234 embarked on a 16-day underwater journey, surfacing briefly for only 2 hours each night, camouflaged by stormy cover. As Germany's Reich was in its final throes of collapse, U-234 received an abrupt directive from Admiral Dönitz, the new head of state, ordering all U-boats to surface and surrender. Then, in a twist of fate, the crew opted to surrender to the United States rather than continuing their mission for Japan, fearing they'd face war crimes charges if captured by the Allies. On May 14, 1945, the USS Sutton, a destroyer escort, intercepted the U-234, which surrendered without putting up resistance. The submarine was then escorted to the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard, where its precious cargo was seized and its crew was held as prisoners of war. U-234's surrender was shrouded in secrecy for many years. The fate of its uranium cargo became a subject of spirited debate and conjecture among historians. Some claim that the uranium found its way into the Manhattan Project, contributing to the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. However, others argue that the uranium's quality and quantity may not have been suited for the American nuclear program. But regardless, to this day, the destiny of U-234's uranium remains an unsolved puzzle. And at number 1, HMAS Onslow. HMAS Onslow is a former submarine of the Royal Australian Navy that's now a museum ship at the Australian National Maritime Museum in Sydney. Onslow was one of 6 Oberon-class submarines that served in the Royal Australian Navy from 1969 to 1999. The Oberon class was a British design that was adapted for Australian conditions and requirements. Onslow was named after the town of Onslow in Western Australia and Sir Alexander Onslow, a former Chief Justice of Western Australia. Onslow had a displacement of 2,030 short tons when surfaced and 2,410 short tons when submerged. It was powered by 2 diesel generators and 2 electric motors that drove 2 propellers. It could reach a speed of over 15 knots when submerged and could descend to a depth of over 620 feet. It had 6 torpedo tubes in the bow and could carry 20 torpedoes or missiles, including the anti-ship Harpoon missile. The vessel also had a crew of 68 men. During the Onslow's operational history, it played a crucial role in enhancing Australia's submarine capabilities. Onslow conducted numerous patrols and exercises in the waters of the Pacific and Indian Oceans, contributing to the country's national security and regional stability. The submarine was also involved in training and joint exercises with allied nations, solidifying its reputation as a vital asset in the Australian Navy's fleet. Onslow was known for its stealth and surprise, as it successfully sank several enemy ships in simulated battles, including the U.S. aircraft carrier USS Carl Vinson in 1998. Onslow was then decommissioned in March of 1999 and was transferred to the Australian National Maritime Museum in April of that same year. It's now preserved as a museum ship and is open to the public. Today, visitors can enter the submarine and see the living and working spaces of the submariners, as well as the engines, torpedoes, and other equipment. Do you think submarines are more useful in wars than surface ships are? Why or why not? Let us know what you think in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.